Welcome back, everybody. It's good to be with you today for another week here. Today we find ourselves in a early 19th century schoolhouse, maybe a one-room schoolhouse, and that's because my editor told me I need to go back to school and re-educate myself. Just kidding. We have a reason for this, and I'll share that with you in a moment. First of all, I want to thank everybody again for participating in our outreach to the community. I think this week we were all a little bit shocked as we thought we were going to have sort of a smaller crowd as things seem to be getting better. And for those who weren't there, we hit 160 again, so our numbers have gone back up. But in light of all that, despite it being February and our last two services being so cold that we thought we were losing our thumbs, it was in the 30s and we did pretty well. And it was quite funny as we got through our first wave and everybody sort of stopped and looked at each other and said, wow, we've only been here for about a half an hour and we've taken care of 120 or so families already. So thank you for that. If you are involved, if you're not involved, get involved. If you'd like to help us out, I think there's donation links. You can send a thing. Everything that's given to us goes 100% towards helping feed people in need of food in the community here. So here we are in our schoolhouse, and why would we be here? Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about moving forward without losing sight of the past. I personally have never went to school, despite the age that my editor may think I am, in a one-room schoolhouse. I will admit that I've been at school in schools that had maybe 4 classes in one room altogether, but never quite this primitive. That's not why we're here, but we are thinking about the idea of moving forward relative to God while not losing sight of the past and the origins of where we were. So in putting this together, I have some passages that I want to share with you, but I want to talk to you a little bit about some ideas that have come and gone that people thought were way too radical initially. But as we look back on them, we think that maybe they're not so radical. Music is always my favorite one. If you ever go down to, if you're in Cleveland, and you go down to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, there is a floor down in the bottom that you can walk through where they give you the history of rock and roll as it came together. And it always makes me laugh because every generation along the way, you have the teenagers getting all involved in what the groovy new thing is, and the parents all sort of sitting there going, no, this is bad, this is bad. And if you get far enough back into its origins, it's not just the parents, but it's also the legislators, the pastors, the townskeepers, all saying, no, this is bad, we can't have this, this is terrible, it's going to lead our children off to terrible places. But each generation, things change. The idea today that Elvis was so remarkably unacceptable back in 1950, whatever that was, puts a smile on my face as I think about it. But it's interesting, I've said before that life imitates art, or I don't know what the connection is there, but in regards to Christianity too, I have had the opportunity to experience people going through things that they just didn't understand, and so casting doubt on what was happening because it seemed new or too challenging or too different from where we've been. And in full disclosure, I've been on both sides of this. In fact, I think you might find today I'm almost on the no, this is bad, we shouldn't be doing this side of the discussion, for hopefully a good reason, a tempering reason. And so in my entry into ministry, there was something new, quote unquote new, called the emerging church. And I know a lot of people were very worried about the idea of an emerging church. I wasn't really sure what we were dealing with, but as I began to read books and look at where people were, it really wasn't a new age, we're going to take you out of church and following God and put you here, so much as it was a Christianity has become so static, so lax. We've really found our comfort zones sitting in a chair with our name on it, essentially saying this is what Christianity is. Once a week, putting on your good clothes and going to church and saying, okay, I did my thing and now I'm home, I'll put some money in the plate or whatever as that goes. And what the people that I encountered anyway from the emerging movement were doing was saying, look, if you're going to follow Christ, you have to get off that chair. You have to come out of that complacency and pursue something different. And I guess in light of my experience, I didn't find anything new about that. A favorite author of mine, Alan Hirsch, wrote a couple of books. Some I've referred people to. There are two that specifically come to mind. One was called Untamed, and that was his look at Christ and Christ's experience in the world that he lived in. The other one was called Forgotten Ways, and Forgotten Ways was really the one that drove me, because Alan at some points would have been considered sort of connected to the emergent movement, but what he was realizing was these ideas may be radical, or they may seem radical, but they're really not new. They're exactly what Christ planted people here to do. And so in that way, these new ideas could be referenced by the, oh, this is not good, it's new, it changes what we want. It could be referenced by going back and looking at Christ's life and saying, no, this is not new, this is old, it's exactly what he wanted. Putting my head in a vein, in that vein, it really gets me thinking about the way we deal with new concepts and new ideas. And there's two sides to the coin. One are the people that are pushing for something new, and the other are the people that are sort of holding back, trying to make sure that we don't make mistakes. And we always get this clash in terms there. And this goes into society, the way we deal with other people. We see a world that looks very different than the one I grew up in. It's jarring sometimes, not necessarily bad. But we've got to make sure all the way along the line there that we're creating and finding those balances. And I'm talking about this today because we're talking about those balances that connect us to the things that are good, to the things that are Christ following. And so I've got something for you here, and this fits in with our environment today. This is not authentic at all, although it's made to look authentic. This is a reproduction, a very thin, cheap, unimaginative reproduction. I'm going to give these to Talia, and her handwriting is going to become just exquisite as a result of this. I have 5 of these. This is the best one. It's the closest to the original that I could find. This is something that if you were going to school in a classroom like this, you would use. It would not be bound with staples or anything quite that fancy, but the cover would look very similar to this, as this was created to look that way. Can you guess what this is? Producer, you have any idea what this is?
Makes your handwriting fancy.
Makes your handwriting fancy, she says. Has a spot up here for you to put your name and what class you're in. This one right here was originally entered according to an act of Congress in the year of 1864 by Finney Blakeman and Company of New York. And this would have been called a copybook, because as you would open these, you would find that they would have examples of letters that they want you to work on, and then frequently you would have sort of the alphabet up here. But this one actually is closest to a true 19th century copybook in that it has words at the top. And what you would do, how you would use this book, is you would first learn these patterns, and then you would write whatever sentence they had there over and over and over again in the book, trying to match it as it goes. And you can go find references to copybooks all over the place. Those pieces at the top right there are called copybook headings. If we have any fans of Rudyard Kipling, poet of the age, in 1919, I think, he copyrighted a poem called Gods of the Copybook Heading, and that right there is a copybook heading. I'm going to read a couple of these to you, because what they did was not only were they teaching kids how to write properly, have good penmanship, but in it too they were helping them memorize maxims. And in that era, maxims were so big, that era and before, that you would have, Ben Franklin wrote books of little sayings. God helps those who help themselves, if you've ever heard of that. That's a maxim. Here's Here's a couple of copybook headings from this particular book. As I said, unimaginative. I think they only got maybe 20 or 25 of them in here. Opinion misleads many, promise little, and do much. What do you think, producer? Is that a good saying? You're not sure. She's scrunching up her scrunch-ups and looking at me. Opinion misleads many, promise little, and do much. Quit not certainty for hope, and that one they just want you to do twice. So if it's short, they might have you do two. I'll give you another good one here. Reputation is not character. You ever know anybody that had a good reputation but a bad character? Recommended by many, can happen, yeah. Frequently in school. And of course my favorite one down here for producer is the last one in the book. It says simply, youth should listen to age. Okay. Alright. So that's a copybook, and those are copybook headings. And what they did back then was they taught kids these old sayings, old tomes of wisdom, that became part of the curriculum as they were learning, and they never forgot those. So now it sounds like I'm pulling us back into the past, and maybe that's true. In copybook headings, biblical proverbs came up frequently. If you think of, I think in Proverbs 26, there's that crazy old one that says, so as a dog returns to its vomit, and a washed up swine to the back to the mud, so a fool returns to his error over and over again. That's in Proverbs, and those would show up there too. I have my Bible that I was talking to you about. This is here with us today, not for posterity or any wonderful thing other than producer made me get this one because all of the other Bibles that I was using were too flashy and reflective. This Bible looks incredibly old, and it's in pieces indeed. It's been well loved. You have a hard time finding things in it anymore because there's too much of it that's marked out and highlighted at this point in its experience. I'm going to share with you a little piece. Actually, I think it's the one that I was just talking to you about. But in Proverbs 26, there is that proverb about a dog returning to its vomit, making reference to a fool returning to its error over and over again, meaning if you don't learn your lesson, you keep on going back to it over and over again. That one comes up again in 2 Peter, and the reason I wanted to share that with you is that very often in the New Testament, Christ did this, Paul did this, Peter does this. They will make reference back to sayings of old, saying just as they said back then, so too we pick this up today. And so in 2 Peter chapter 2, this is one of those fun passages. Get this one. We've been talking in our Saturday mornings about how I like the 6:6s. Hosea 6:6, Amos, I think, Micah 6:6, all these ones that are referring to what God wants from people. This is literally 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 22. So there's 4 twos in this one. But the whole chapter of 2 Peter is about false teachers. And he's talking to people about the reality that when you come to know who God is through Christ, that's a different picture of God than the one that you've traditionally had. It should shake you, change you, and jar you into something new. But if you allow yourself to be swayed too easily this way and that, you can be pulled back into the error of your ways again. And so he makes this caution in here. And in fact, after telling people, cling to the teachings of Christ, Paul did this all the time too, he literally ends this chapter about false teachers and prophets and people that would teach you the wrong way by saying, what happens to them when they allow themselves to be pulled back shows that the proverbs are true. A dog goes back to it what it has vomited, and a pig that has been washed goes back to roll in the mud. And so there you see Peter cycling through the new teachings of Christ, yet bringing them back to those old catches of wisdom to point out that there is still value in those teachings applied through today. And so what I gained from this is that though those who know me know that I seem to be forever trying to push forward in progress in Christianity and reaching for more, there is value too in remembering the tomes of old and keep your head thinking in the right ways. Friends, as we push forward as society, it is, as always, my caution to say let's not go so fast that we remember our foundings. I love the fact that Alan Hirsch, in writing about the way we should be looking at church and Christianity different than we traditionally do, different than sitting back and enjoying the life we have as we've decided to live for eternity, coming out of that and into a more active following of Christ by not naming it the emergence or the new way or the better thing or the this or that. He literally calls that book The Forgotten Way. It teaches us that Christ is a transcendental figure. He's one who lived in the past in a way that we still haven't figured out how to follow properly today. So Forgotten Ways becomes a good message. As we people, it's my hope and goal that we never stop growing, that we never stop learning, that we never stop maturing, but that we grow in the truth of our past into the brightness of our future. Friends, I hope that we entertained you some here today. I hope that we taught you something here today. And I challenge you all to go back and find some of those old copybook headings and start applying those to your life today, because some of them are so good and so on point for the life we live today. Don't get so caught up in what everybody wants you to do going forward without looking back and balancing your life. Christ had a perfect balance of who we need to be, and that is always going to be the best life for us to look at. We love you. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.